Over Kentucky in the winter of 1948, a fighter pilot climbed toward a bright object that seemed to hang above the clouds. Minutes later, his aircraft was gone, and the question still lingers. What was he chasing? The setting was bluegrass country, where open fields, cold air, and military bases shared the same winter sky. In that landscape, even a small anomaly could draw attention fast. This was the early era of the flying saucer age, when reports were spreading across America and official nerves were already raw. Every strange light now felt like a possible threat, a secret, or both. Captain Thomas Mantell was not a man likely to mistake the sky for a fantasy. He was a decorated pilot, experienced in wartime flying, and on this day he was on a routine mission. The first reports came from people on the ground who saw something unusual overhead and called authorities. What they described was large, bright, and unlike the ordinary traffic of the era. At first, the object was treated as a curiosity, not a crisis. Then the call went out to intercept it, and the situation shifted from observation to pursuit. 3 pilots took off, climbing into the cold air to get a closer look. In the early moments, the target still seemed distant, almost deceptively calm against the winter sky. Witnesses later described the object as moving in a way that kept it just out of easy judgment. It was there, then farther away, with a steadiness that made it feel deliberate. That is one of the details that keeps the case alive. The reported behavior did not fit a simple drifting balloon in the minds of those who saw it. It seemed to hold its position, then pull away. As the pilots climbed higher, the air grew thinner and colder, and the margin for error narrowed. The chase was now taking place in a zone where judgment, speed, and oxygen all mattered. The official account says Mantell pressed on while the others turned back or lost the object from view. That left one pilot continuing alone, and the tension in the story sharpened immediately. Soon after, radio contact became uncertain, and the chase no longer sounded routine. What had been a sighting on the horizon was turning into a disappearance in real time. The aircraft was later reported to have broken apart in the air before crashing. Investigators had to reconstruct the final moments from wreckage, timing, and the testimony of those who had watched the sky. That final descent is the most painful part of the case, because it joins mystery to tragedy. A pursuit that began with curiosity ended with a death that could not be taken back. In the aftermath, the Air Force and local accounts tried to make sense of what had happened. The object itself was no longer available, but the questions around it only multiplied. One major detail was the object's apparent brightness, which made it stand out against the pale winter sky. Supporters of the extraordinary reading say that kind of visibility suggests something substantial, not a fleeting illusion. Another detail is the reported altitude change as the pilots climbed. If the object was a balloon, it would still have had to match the timing and position described by multiple witnesses. A third detail is the split between what people on the ground saw and what the pilots believed they were following. That gap between observation and interpretation is where the case becomes so hard to settle. There was also the matter of military urgency. In 1948, the United States was already sensitive to unidentified objects in protected airspace, so the decision to intercept was not made lightly. For believers in the unusual interpretation, this is exactly why the incident matters. A trained pilot, a coordinated pursuit, and a fatal ending are not the ingredients of a trivial mistake. Still, the conventional reading has weight. Investigators noted that high-altitude aircraft can lose power, pilots can suffer oxygen problems, and a bright object can be misjudged under pressure. A weather balloon was eventually offered as the likely explanation for the object itself, and that idea remains central to the official line. From a distance, a balloon can appear far more imposing than it really is. Yet the balloon explanation leaves a lingering tension with the pursuit. If the target was small and harmless, why did experienced pilots believe it warranted a climb into dangerous altitude? That question leads to the human side of the case, where judgment, urgency, and expectation all collide. In the sky, a pilot can only work with what seems most real in the moment. The crash itself remains the hardest fact to absorb, because it anchors the entire mystery in loss. Whatever was seen above the clouds, the final result on the ground was unmistakably real. And yet the emotional force of the case comes from the unanswered middle, where the object was, how it moved, and what Mantell believed he was seeing. Those are the moments that refuse to settle neatly. Some researchers have pointed to the era's limited air traffic awareness and imperfect communication as part of the confusion. In that sense, the incident may reflect a dangerous meeting of technology and uncertainty. But the case endures because it never feels fully reduced to one cause. A balloon explains one layer, while the pilot's response, the timing, and the fatal outcome keep the story unsettled. That is why the Mantell incident still draws attention decades later. It sits at the intersection of sky mystery, military history, and a death that seemed tied to something just beyond reach. The strongest unresolved point is not simply what the object was, but how a trained pilot interpreted it with enough conviction to continue climbing. That decision remains the heart of the mystery. If the object was mundane, the case becomes a tragedy of misidentification and altitude. If it was something stranger, then Mantell may have been one of the first to pay the price for looking too closely. Either way, the record leaves us with a pilot, a pursuit, and a sky that did not give up its secret. The official explanation can be spoken, but it does not entirely close the emotional case.